Yeah.
Roy, we're here at Chesterfield in Osborne in front of what used to be Chesterfield School. Tell me about the school and the building itself.
Well, this marvellous building that we have here, certainly even now it's impressive, and in its day it was even more impressive. It was built in 1913, and in actual fact it is the second Chesterfield School. The original was down on Lonsdale and 14th, and that was at that time owned by Mr. Scriven, who was a dedicated schoolmaster and in fact was involved with other schools in this area. But this place here was in 1913, not just this as we see it now, but 7 lots. And at the far end of the 7 lots down Osborne, we had a gymnasium with a classroom on top, and we also had a swimming pool. And during the walks we were interested to find out that some of the people who lived in this district found that they were to have this gymnasium and the swimming pool at the far end, more east of this, and they decided to protest against this because it stopped their view of the harbour. So that is why we find all of this down this end. We can't see it now where the gymnasium was, simply because of the fact that the houses are there. But if you go up the cut to the side here, you will find 2 very large retaining walls, and they're an indication of where that gymnasium and the swimming pool were. There were many people who lived here, went to this school, and one of the things about this was the fact that it was, in the first instance, owned by the Reverend Rowe, who was an Anglican priest, and he was the first priest at St. Martin's Church, and he also went to St. Agnes Church over near the Grand Boulevard. And he gave the job of principal to Reverend John Newton Sykes, and he was for many years principal here. But one of the things I'd have to show you, this is a very impressive place. It's now an apartment building, but to show you how much it looks like as it was in 1930, I've got to show you something round the corner here. So these stairs are the reason why I brought you around here, Olga. These stairs as they are now, they're not the originals of course, but they look just the way they were in the old days when this was the old way of getting people out of a building, and this that we see here is the dormitory building of the school.
Well, Roy, how many students were there at the school?
Well, the number of students in this school, like all other schools of this type, depended on the economic situation at the time. But at the height, I would say, there were 290-odd students here, making up the day students and the boarders.
How many boarders would there be? Do you have any idea?
Oh, that varied depending, again, who lived here and what the state was of the ebb and flow of the population. One thing I must tell you about, something quite unique, talking of fire, was that in the days when all of these houses were made of wood, there was a great fire risk, not only from the point of view of the building itself, but also from forest fires. And this school was unique in the respect that the principal, who I mentioned before, John Newton Sykes, was the volunteer fire chief of North Lonsdale. And his students were the fire brigade. He trained them in firefighting. And we shall see the hose reel station, which is about 100 feet in from Lonsdale on St. James East. And when the fire bell rang, these boys and the Reverend Sykes, complete with dog collar, had to rush up to the fire brigade and take the hose reels out and run up Lonsdale or down Lonsdale, wherever, to the fire. And not only were they unique in the respect that they were schoolboys, but it was about the only fire brigade we had in this whole area that were known to run to fires with their collars and ties on, and of course with the fire chief wearing a clerical collar. They also had the reputation of not only being very good at the job, but they were the only fire brigade who ran to the fire and also from the fire for their training.
A very athletic group of, shall we say, fire boys. Roy, where do we go from here?
We're now going to a house called Salopia, which is on the corner of St. George and Windsor.
Well, here we go.
Right.
We're standing here on the steps of a home at the corner of St. George's and Windsor. The home is called Salopia. Roy, what does Salopia mean?
Well, Salopia means pertaining to Shropshire, and the name was given by Bob Clark, the present owner of this house, in memory of his father, who came from Shropshire. But it's rather interesting because the original owner of this house, which was built in 1914, was a gentleman by the name of Benjamin John Cornish. And he and his family came from Shropshire also. So we have something of a coincidence. This is what you can really call a heritage home. It is almost exactly now the way that it was in 1914. And one can say, as with many of these homes, that the present owners have worked very hard and spent a great deal of money putting them back to the way they were. This house was really a retirement home for Benjamin John Cornish, because he was a councillor of what was the municipality of North Vancouver before it was a city. That was way back in 1899, and he was a councillor under Reeve J.C. Woodrow, and he had fellow councillors like W.H. May and Walter Urban and J.R. Tite. You may recall Walter Irwin because he was the keeper of the Roberts Point Lighthouse, and there is another book that talks about him. But nevertheless, he served under Reeve Wickenham in 1901, and Wickenham himself had his term from January of 1901 right up to 1903. He resigned in 1901, and he'd really served for many terms at the very difficult time when everyone was deciding whether to make North Vancouver into a city. We have one of the pioneers who was something of a historian, John Roger Burns, and he says of the owner of this house, Ben Cornish, Mr. Cornish was one of those that lived on 15th Street East when he first came to North Vancouver. And he did a lot for North Vancouver in those troubled times. He should be remembered by having a street or a park named after him. Well, that never did happen, but nevertheless, we have a piece of heritage here to show how he ended up. It's rather interesting because, as you can see, this house is very special in the respect that it has broad wood frame windows. The frames are very wide, and it's of Tudor style, which is most unusual over here. And it has intersecting batten patterns, and it has a steep roof, and it has an entry porch and a veranda over the top of it with delicate fencing patterns. This, of course, is, I suppose, not very surprising because Ben Cornish was a partner in the firm of Cornish and Cooper, who were wood specialists and building supply specialists, and also builders of homes just like this. Since that time, we have had 2 generations of the Ames family living here, and then after that we had Tom Dale and his family for some 15 years before Bob Clark arrived. The people who live around here remember the Ames very well because in the 1920s, this was the only house in the district that had electric Christmas lights, and people came from all over the place to see the electric Christmas lights. Oh, we're now going down Windsor on what used to be Nye Road, and we're going to 155 Windsor to have a look at the Cornish residence.